3. Oh, topic number 3 is about me, y'all, because last but not least, and this isn't directed at any tweet or any post on social media.
Right.
But we're looking on the timeline, and everybody's giving their opinions on who should be MVP, who should be All NBA, and those opinions are cool. But I actually got to vote. You feel me? So I gotta just break down my ballot.
That's a blessing, man.
It is a blessing, man. This is one of those things that, like, when I was younger, as a little kid, you know what I'm saying, thinking that this is what I wanted to do, you know, I always thought, you know, one way that I could measure my success is when I got the designation to vote for All-Stars, which I did earlier this year, and now I'm voting for MVP, and it's crazy, right?
Let's clap it up for Kristian real quick. Congratulations,
appreciate
homie.
that, man. My votes actually...
I don't want to cut you off right now, bro, but that's big time, bro, and that just shows how much work you put in. I know people see the joke side of you, but people don't realize how hard you work at what you do, man, and you deserve that. Real talk, man.
Yeah, congratulations. Even if you do write about the Brooklyn Nets, it's still congratulations.
And the craziest part is, you know, my votes could potentially trigger an incentive for one of these players who might, you know, make an extra $125,000 if they make first team All NBA or if they get MVP
piece of that
votes.
Pie?
I wish. What?
You should get a little incentive. You know what I'm saying? A little something.
They should. You feel me?
Let's hear how you're voting then.
Yeah. So for my MVP, right, you have to go 5 for number 1. I know a lot of people went Nikola Yogic. I went Joel Embiid. You know, I just compared the team's records. You know, obviously the Nuggets had a lot of players out, but the Sixers didn't have Ben Simmons all year. Had a trade midseason, got James Harden. He hasn't even been as good as they wanted him to be, and they're still 51-31 at the end of the season. Joel Embiid is dominant. I love his dominant style of play, protecting the rim, can score anywhere, impossible to stop. So I voted for him as MVP. Number 2 is Nikola Yogic because, I mean, just one-man band. When you talk about Luka, he's kind of like, if you supersize Luka, you get Embiid. I mean, you get Jokic, is what he's able to do out there on the floor, minus the step. He's doing step backs too. He's crazy, right? 3rd, I voted for Giannis, obviously, just because of what he's been able to do this season. Again, just keeping the Bucks in that championship contention. The way he does it, points are absolute. His stat line is absolute, like KD said. I gave him a vote for number 3. Number 4, I voted for Devin Booker, just because, I mean, that Suns team is tough, and Book is the head of that snake. You know, I feel like the best player on the best team in the league should always get a vote, and I gave him my 4th place vote because I think there's a clear cutoff between those top 3 and Embiid, Jokic, and Antetokounmpo, and then the next 2. So I have Booker at number 4. And at number 5, I don't know if anybody else voted for him, but I voted for Kevin Durant. And that's because we have to define what value is. When Kevin Durant got hurt, the Nets were the number 1 seed. They were 27-15. Then he missed games. They lost their next 11, never really recovered, right? And now you're looking at a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. That's all because Kevin Durant got hurt. I think that's really what value is. I think if he didn't get hurt, we might be talking about him as that number 1 for MVP. That's how I voted for it in my MVP list. What do you guys think?
Well, my MVP is Jokic.
I think you did a good job.
Oh,
there's that. I say this, and then Lethal, obviously giving your take. I say Jokic because I think it's extremely impressive if you look at, you know, the teams and how they're constructed. I think the 76ers are a lot more deep than the Nuggets are. I think it's really impressive that in a Western Conference, which, is not as dominant as it once was, but it's still the West, that the Nuggets are 6th seed and technically only 3 games behind the 76ers in the East, which means if the Nuggets were in the East, they'd be a much higher seed. I just think that's impressive that one guy is really, truly responsible for that team's success, and that guy's Jokic. That's not to take away from Embiid, but I just think when you look at that, and Jokic has the slight edge in my vote than Embiid does. But I'm not mad at someone who gives it to Embiid either. He's been playing one hell of a season.
It's fair to say that all of them deserve it, but I would have to go with Joel Embiid as well. And honestly, I don't really care who it is, long as it's a big this year, because the bigs in the NBA have been doing a great job to show us that their presence is here and they're here to stay.
100%. You know, so I guess we'll move on next to most improved, which was for me. It was tough. That was one of the most difficult ones for me to vote for because so many players took steps in their game this year. 3rd place, I voted for Jordan Poole in Golden State. I mean, him just being able to now he's a bucket, right? You're expecting him to come out there and get you 20 a game, 23, 24 a game, versus last year it was kind of a toss-up. You didn't know what you were going to get from him. So he was definitely on my ballot. Number 2 for me was Darius Garland in Cleveland. Cleveland. I mean, when you just look at this Cavs team runs through him, right? He's the head of their snake. And when you look at what happened with Colin Sexton, he goes down. He just steps in and this team gets better. And that's because I asked this of Coach JB Bickerstaff. It's just like he put in so much work in his game in the offseason. You've got players now like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving talking about, hey, we've got to figure out ways to contain Garland tonight in that playing game, which is crazy. But I think the most improved player in this league is Ja Morant. And that just goes to show you, because last year he was already really good last year, right? Don't get it twisted. But you have to continue to work on your game to go from fringe star to now absolute superstar. And I think him taking that jump, it's just undeniable. He went from scoring 19 points a game to now averaging 27. You literally can't contain him, right? And I think he still has a ways to go in his game, but just the way he's been able to move this season. I asked one Cavs player who their most improved. I asked one Cavs player to tell me why Darius Garland should be the most improved player, and they said, yeah, as improved as Darius Garland has been, the most improved player in my book is Ja Morant, and that rang bells for me. When I heard that, I was like, yeah, you're right, because Ja has just been that good. So that's how I voted. What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, I'm actually have Darius Garland as my pick. I think because he's made a drastic improvement. For me, Ja has always been that guy. I think the rest of the world is just catching on to it. But I think he has already shown that he is MVP caliber, that he's the leader of that team. And yes, that's not to say that he hasn't made strides. But when I think of most improved, I think of someone who kind of went from nothing to something. Like when I think of most improved, perfect example, people are going to be like, you're a Knicks fan, so you're going to say this. But Julius Randle was a perfect player for most improved because his first season in New York was atrocious. Like, he wrote a letter on the Players Tribune apologizing to Knicks fans for how bad his first season was. And then the next season, it's night and day. It's a drastically different player. So for me, when I look at most improved, that's my criteria. And Ja has not made that drastic transition because he's always been good. He's always been elusive. He's always been a leader. He's always been the swag of Memphis. So for me, it had to go to someone like Darius Garland, who I think has made such a drastic jump in his career.
Just to push back on that a little bit, I think that jump also comes from just getting more opportunity, right? Last year, he had to share the floor with Colin Sexton, right? So now you're seeing that increased role in being the focal point of an offense. And if you're just going from numbers, he's only averaging 4 more points than he was last season in 2 more minutes, right? So you're looking at Ja Morant, who's averaging 9 more points in basically the same amount of play time. I'm like, okay, well, that also shows you. But I do, it was tough for me to decide that vote as well. But the team is also constructed around
Ja differently than it is in Cleveland. I think it's still impressive that with him, Darius not being the sole focal point of the Cavs, I think that for him to just make that jump in his trajectory as a player. But I'm far from mad that you gave it to Ja Morant. I've been on the Grizzlies train since day one, so I'm not mad.
Yeah, nah, Ja for me, it just like for him to be even in the conversation for MVP at this point where people are looking at him like, can he even get this award this year? That just spoke volumes to me. I'm like, okay, he's grown again. And I feel like it's harder to go from good to great than it is to go from great to greater, right? And I just wanted to reward him for that as well.